Welcome to DEUTSCHE GOLDMESSE. We have another fireside chat planned right now, and I'm joined by Dominic Frisby of the Flying Frisby on Substack and Matthew Piepenburg of Matterhorn Asset Management. Great to have you back, gentlemen. It's great to see you. Thanks for coming to Frankfurt, of course.
My pleasure. Thank you, Guy. Thanks for having us.
It's great to see you in person. You're both keynotes. You'll be holding the closing keynote here in an hour or something. Yeah, and you gave a great opening keynote. Got great to look back on it.
Yeah.
And I'm going to start with you because we had a chat yesterday at our reception. And he said, "Oh, Guy, it's so tough to find something original to say about gold." I think you managed.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So much has been said about gold by so many wise people over the years. It is very difficult to find something original to say, but I will offer this, and that is that, as we all know, you can't destroy gold. It's the one thing on earth that you cannot destroy. It doesn't tarnish, it doesn't rust. All the gold that's in the Earth's crust is exactly as it was when the Earth formed. And actually, the only way you can destroy gold is through nuclear explosion or by dissolving it in certain types of acid. But even then, the gold is still there. You can still recover it. Now, gold, how is gold formed? And there's one theory which is divine creation, and there's another theory that it happens when supernovae collisions, when stars collide. And in fact, there was a collision of stars in about 2017. And scientists think they witnessed gold millions of light years away actually being formed. But we know that gold was present in the dust which formed the solar system. And gradually that dust, gravity and all sorts of other forces pushed that dust together and planets were formed. And so is the gold that is in the Earth's crust exactly as it was when the Earth was formed. And in fact, it's exactly as it was before the solar system was formed. So when you're touching gold, when you're touching the gold that's in your ring or round your neck, you are touching something that is exactly as it was before the solar system was formed. It is older than the solar system itself. You are doing the closest thing to touching eternity.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very profound thought. And the ancient Egyptians used to say that gold would see your passage into the afterlife. You know, gold was the link between man and the gods. And I think the Incas used to say gold was the tears of the sun. And in fact, the only scientific applications we have for gold today, there are a few, but the main ones are mostly in outer space at the final frontier, because we need gold because it's the most durable of all the metals. So we use it on the visors to coat spacecraft and on the visors of astronauts' helmets and so on.
Yeah.
So I just think this sort of link between gold and eternity. And then, of course, you look at gold's purchasing power, which is not quite as eternal as gold itself, but it is the most eternal thing we have in terms of purchasing power. You can buy as much food or accommodation or clothing or energy as it bought 100 or 1,000 years ago or 2,000 years ago. So this incredible durability of gold, and that's why it's such a good store of value, but also why it's such a good unit of account. You know, the three functions of money: medium of exchange, store of value, unit of account. And like the dollar is a rotten unit of account because you have to inflation adjust it, whereas gold is brilliant. And it's not great as a medium of exchange. It can be used, but unit of value and unit of account, store of value, there is no one equal. So that's one original thing to say about gold: you are touching eternity.
Yeah, I'm dead because I haven't heard that actually, it is refreshing. It was interesting listening because I haven't heard it before.
Well, it's good. He brought us back to reality with all these talks about spreads and ratios and graphs and charts and yields and bond market comps and currency comps, but in digital versus analog comps. But let's remember, gold is natural. It's a monetary metal. It's also something with this fantastic mystery behind it, but a corporal and metaphorical reality. And I think the corporal reality is it's something unlike a U.S. Treasury or a gilt that has infinite duration, literally infinite origins and infinite duration, but a finite supply. So it has something intrinsically valuable in and of itself. And we lose track of that as we're debating. Certainly when you're debating currencies or you're debating other asset classes, But this infinite value has something to do, or this infinite duration has something to do with its trustability and its loyalty. And that gets into you had a quote by Lowe, and I know Egon von Greyer's had a quote by George Bernard Shaw about if you had to choose between the loyalty of a political party or a monetary policy maker and a precious metal or gold, the choice is always going to be gold. And I look at, you're going from, Lowe to George Bernard Shaw to Ernest Hemingway. Again, these are not gold backers. These are not central bankers. These are not politicians. These are authors and thinkers. You have to get poetic again and come back to the heart of the matter outside of the inflation, deflation, combination debates. And like Hemingway said, every political system, when it gets into debt, it always does three things. It debases the currency, it chases after inflation, it lies, and it puts you in war. And that's exactly where we are today in the world. Certainly in my country, it's been a war since I was born somewhere in the world. And it's not as loyal as gold. It's debasing your dollar. It's debasing the truth. Look at we could probably spend an hour just on the string side of you could say mistakes made by Yellen, Powell, Bernanke, or quotes that they've made that were not maybe mistakes, but completely untrue. Meanwhile, gold, that infinite little piece of God's natural earth, sits there and does nothing while currencies get weaker and weaker and weaker. And I think it's important to get back to the loyalty and the honesty of gold, despite what you think of his thesis, my thesis, anyone's thesis. It's pretty universal, pretty timeless. And as you made a comment today, whenever a new world reserve currency peaks up, like the US dollar did in Bretton Woods, it always starts with a gold backing. Then it gets over its skis and debt, it sins, and then it debases and loses the chaperone. Chinese now are clearly stacking gold, more than reported by the World Gold Council, because they see a new, not tomorrow, but a new gold-backed, gold-covered new currency to replace the dollar. And it has to have credibility and loyalty because the countries in those alliances don't trust each other. They still trust gold. And when that issue of trust, that natural trust that gold inspires, I think is something we lose sight of, talking about inflation, deflation, currencies, central bank movements, rate cuts. We have to get back to what gold is. And I think it's important.
Go ahead, you've got something to chime in there. The kind of irony is that most gold bugs tend to favor libertarian, small government, that kind of thing. Yeah. And the great Shaw quote was, you have to choose between the natural stability of gold and the natural stability of governments. And I advise you, as long as the capitalist system lasts, to choose gold. It's way more reliable than human beings. Yeah. And the irony of that is that Shaw was actually a socialist. he wasn't a right winger. He was a left winger. Yeah. But that first quote, that Lowe quote, where he said the desire for gold is the deepest rooted and oldest commercial instinct in mankind. I'm paraphrasing him, but that was the essential of what he said. Yeah. And gold was actually the very first metal. People say gold's been money for 5,000 years. It's actually been money for 50,000 years. It was the very first metal that human beings used. When we were back in the Paleolithic age, when we were, migrant, wandering, we would encounter gold in riverbeds, nuggets of gold, probably much more plentiful than now because most of the easy to find stuff has been found. And we'd adorn ourselves with it. And if you look at, there's a cave, I think it's Holz Cave in Germany, the oldest cave in the world, the oldest cave in the world, right. 40,000 years old, and there's gold beads in there. Now, this is tens of thousands of years before the Bronze Age. Right. This is tens of thousands of years before we discovered smelting and metal tools and all the rest of it. Mm. We were adorning ourselves with bits of gold, and we were using it to display beauty, to display status. We were probably using it as reward. We were trading with it. In other words, it was primitive money. And that's why that Lowe quote about it being the most primitive, deeply rooted commercial instinct is absolutely right. Yeah. And I often look at gold and I think, the horse was transport for thousands of years. And then we invented the motor car and the horse became irrelevant. Maybe the same could be said about gold. Maybe it's irrelevant to the modern financial system. There's a strong argument for that. It is, today value is digital. Money is digital. 99% of money is digital. Stocks, shares, cryptocurrencies, trademarks, copyright, everything is digital. Value is digital today. And gold is the most analog asset there is. Right. This permanent physical thing. It is an analog asset in a digital world. And we do still use it to store value, but, maybe it is irrelevant. But then you come back to that fact that it is the most primal, basic commercial instinct. It's our instinct for gold is as basic as our instinct for beauty. And you take a gold coin, and what's his name? Egon was passing the gold coin around the audience, and everyone was just staring at the gold coin. It compels that we have an instinct for gold.
Yeah. It's interesting. Like you're saying, like everybody perceives it and everybody loves it, but it doesn't feel like it in the markets. Yes, we have 2040 gold right now or so roughly, but it doesn't feel like the general.
We're not touching it.
Yeah, probably. It's like, do we need to know gold coins? But look, understand it, get the generalists back in.
Look at where the world is going, and this is not just the de-dollarization thing we've beaten down to death, but I think and Dominic touched on it as well today, and I'll touch on it this afternoon. First of all, there's something, again, it goes to the loyalty and the timelessness of it. At one point, Bernanke called gold, it's a tradition. And then, of course, it's a barbarous relic. It just sits in the ground and you pay a fee to stare at it. And then there was a time when Alan Greenspan, when he was writing his thesis, before he literally sold his conviction to Wall Street and DC, literally changed his thinking overnight. Because it's convenient to push gold away as a barbarous relic, whether it's beyond the digital analog debate. And yes, there's a strong argument that the blockchain and the digital reality is the new car past the old cart horse. The Irish sport horse is fun to ride, but you don't go to work in it. And it's the same with Bitcoin replacing gold. I'm not here to get in that debate about Bitcoin versus gold, but that chaperone, that loyalty of gold, which is what the dollar had before Nixon welched, which is why we were credible post Bretton Woods. But going back to what Dominic was talking about today, and what I'll talk about this afternoon, is this flow east and this flow of gold purchasing by central banks. They're not buying Bitcoin or other cryptos. They're stacking gold to get credibility. It still has a timeless trust. And whether we can debate whether the ruble or the yuan will become more predominant immediately or down the road versus the dollar, what will give them credibility, what will give anything, even digital token guys are looking for gold-backed tokens to beat out other digital coins. It still has that, going back to that cave in Germany to today, that trust that human beings don't have and countries don't have for each other, and that currencies don't have unless they're credibly legitimized by gold backing. That's why I don't think it's a barbarous relic. And I think that's because it's such an existential threat to bad, unsound money policies. It's not talked about enough as it should be.
I was going to ask you how you're putting the theory into practice, into real life reality. Mm-hmm. For us, you write a Substack, you're an advisor, you're a partner at Matterhorn Asset Management. Dominic, how are you putting your theories into reality? Meaning, how are you investing?
Mm-hmm. Well, I own gold. I own lots of gold, and I've got it safely stored away. I'm not going to say where.
Add in the comment. This will be the description below.
And I invest in gold mining companies, which is probably a mistake because they've just been a terrible investment.
Yeah.
And the problem I have with mining is, like I can invent an app. I can code up an app in probably a few weeks or months. I can upload the app to the App Store, and that app can be downloaded 1 million times or 1 billion times. And so there's a sort of scalability to digital technology. Whereas, it takes 16 years to take a mine from discovery to production. And that's a long time to wait to see a return on your investment. Now, if regulation was not so onerous, that time could be accelerated a little bit, but not that much. But even so, let's say you shaved a third off and it's 10 years, it's still a long time to see a return on your investment. But in that 10 to 15 year period, there's just so much that can go wrong. It's just giving you more scope for the market to change, for the attitude, for the gold price to fall, for the gold price to rise, for environmentalists, for a political change. There's just so much that can go wrong. It's even worse with uranium. And, because the uranium is even more political than gold is. And it's just such a difficult business. But at the same time, it's, people say prostitution is the oldest industry in the world. I bet you mining's older.
You mentioned that to somebody. I said the same thing to a friend the other day as well, talking about mining and what we do. Because you got to pay the hooker.
Yeah.
Right? With something.
Yeah.
And just pay with buttons. Right? So there had to be something.
Yeah.
Even if it's copper or something. It doesn't matter. Just have to be gold.
There's nothing, this interview, and there's just nothing in the world that exists that would not be possible without mining. It's just fundamental for everything. And yet we loathe it. We try and offshore it. In the UK, UK used to be, we used to export mining talent all around the world, and we had so many mines in the UK. I think we've got like 2 mines in the UK now. It's just, it's crazy. And we export it, the mining, to places that probably do it in a less environmentally friendly
less
way than we
controlled.
do.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think this theme of prostitution and portfolio management very intertwined. Because, look, and there's another great quote by Andrew Jackson in the 1830s. You know, when he was thinking, we were thinking about a central bank pre-1910, pre-1913, he warned that the central bank, when it becomes part of our politics, is the prostitution of our politicians at the expense of the many for the benefit of the few. And we've seen that, what they've done to destroy currencies and basically take over natural supply and demand. I think whether you're a gold bug or a crypto bug or whatever, when you understand sound money, you see the destructive power of these independent central banks, which they are the market right now. And they have created the greatest wealth inequality, which is not good for wherever you are on that wealth spectrum. For society, the ramifications are massive. So there's a prostitution of truth in politics. And I think this goes back to, what would I do with my portfolio? Well, of course, Matt, you're in Switzerland, you're an executive, you're putting it all the hole in the ground. Of course, I have physical gold as insurance, not as a speculative asset. And that's a question. Mining's a speculative asset. My daughter, who's 28 at Goldman Sachs, working for the enemy, I said, you have the age and the time to wait for that trend to go up, because that commodity cycle will come up. Others are more impatient. I understand that. But I look at gold. If my central bank won't back the dollar thanks to Nixon's prostituting of himself and our gold sound money so he could get reelected before Watergate, since politicians will prostitute their virtues almost without exception, I want to make my own central bank. And my own central bank is to ensure my own currency, whether it's a pound, a euro, a yuan, a peso, or a dollar. I'll back my own currency with my own physical gold held in the ground or wherever you put it, under a mattress or wherever you want to do it, regardless of your income. We can all make ourselves our own better central bankers. We can have better monetary policy by that timeless, interesting relic that came back from God knows when.
Your comment just gave me an idea of a question, actually. As you mentioned, gold is flowing east because they're buying gold, obviously. Western central banks are not even thinking about it. So, and we're seeing a decay in the dollar, right? In your mind, like would it make sense for the Western central banks start going into competition buying gold to just at least slow down the decay of our currencies, our value systems, and everything else? Just maybe slow down China and the BRICS taking over. Is that feasible, or would they, by doing that, undermine what they're doing anyway? It's a tricky question. It doesn't matter. It's like you can chime in there.
If I was, I used to be very friendly with a guy called Lord Andrew Feldman, who was head of the Conservative Party, chairman of the Conservative Party when David Cameron was Prime Minister and George Osborne was Chancellor. And I just used to say to him every time, I must have bored the pants off him, but I just used to say, print the money and buy. If you can print money, why would you not print money and buy gold? I mean, you know. But I used to say, print the money and buy the gold back that Gordon Brown sold every time. And even today at these high prices, I was just like, it doesn't matter. So yes, if I was a central bank, I would be increasing my...
Going to competition, right? So
if you can
slow
print
down
money
the
and buy
flow
gold,
at least.
it's just,
Yeah, because it's quite evident what is going on.
This is
right?
an important question. This is the critical difference I see between the West and the East. And I think it's a really important one. I could be wrong, but this is what my experience, my study, and my personal experience living in Europe, in the U.S., and traveling to the East is, and being highly American and patriotic, but incredibly critical at the same time, which is necessary to anyone, I think, who's a patriot, wherever your country. But the U.S. in particular loves the short-sighted, myopic policy to get reelected or to get if you're Bernanke, get a Nobel Prize, which I think should have been for fiction, not economics, for printing money out of nowhere to monetize our debt. It's a joke. But if we want instant gratitude, we want instant reelection, whether you're Nixon or whether you're a senator from Ohio or Michigan or wherever, there's this need to say, yes, we're going to be sound, we're going to be smart. We're going to solve this problem with a mouse clicker at the Eccles building. It'll be great for my reelection. It'll be great for the state and national budget. We'll worry about the bill next week. We'll kick that can. The West is over its skis in debt. It's mathematically, empirically obvious. The East, Russia and China, are certainly used to hard history, hard austerity, and hard ruling. But they're also, and believe me, I don't want to live under a Russian or Chinese regime, but the simple fact is they're thinking 8 or 9 moves ahead where that hockey puck is. We're only thinking politically what works for the soundbite, for the pump, the stump speech, and to get reelected. We're not informed about our monetary policy, our budgets, or our deficits, and our politicians aren't helping. Our media, which is owned by the politics, isn't helping either, which is why you got to go to Substack to get real information.
Yeah, but you're going to have the problems with a 4 or 5 year election cycles. And just
the East is thinking longer term. What are they thinking? You're right. World Gold Council's notion of what China's gold is completely wrong. And so the East is thinking way ahead. We can right now it's all theoretical. And Egon made a joke yesterday. His grandkids will be au pairs for the Chinese. It used to be the other way at the British Empire. It was a joke, but it's kind of serious. Again, it's not being anti-American to say we're going to look for central bank digital currency in a more fiat scenario with some type of technology. Digital BS, it's the same thing as paper BS. It's just in a digital form. But Russia and China are looking for trade agreements with a gold backing.
What's interesting is that even though central banks have been increasing their gold holdings since 2006, 2007, that was the kind of low, the all-time low.
Yeah.
Their gold holdings relative to their other foreign exchange holdings were flat. But in the last 3 or 4 years, suddenly, gradually, you've seen that turn up. So central bank gold holdings relative to their other foreign exchange holdings have actually increased. And that's a very significant development.
Yeah.
And then you look at who's actually been buying. Obviously China, a lot of the stans have been buying, and it's a lot of countries in that Shanghai Cooperation Organization.
Yeah.
And you're like, what do they know that we don't know? What have they got planned?
Yeah. What are they talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting. To sort of end the conversation, I want to give each of you maybe 30, 60 seconds to sort of summarize in your end, how is this all going to play out? But for lack of a better term, call it the end game scenario.
Yeah.
Okay. Matthew, we'll start with you. Is like, how is this all going to play out? What do you see is going to happen?
Yeah.
Maybe put some time frames around it as well.
Yeah.
If you can.
And in 60 seconds, I want to respect that.
I know. It's like, we'll try.
The syllogism for me is very simple historically. It's way past Wall Street talk. Every time throughout history, you have a debt-soaked nation, whether it's the Ming Dynasty, ancient Rome, the 1930s, Weimar, Spain, Italy, Franco, whatever. Well, every debt-soaked nation does the same thing. It gets over its debt and skis, takes zero accountability for that. Then you have a market crisis, and you have a financial crisis. You have a currency crisis, which always leads to inflation, as Hemingway said, and always leads to debasement of the currency, which leads to social unrest, because that's painful on the Hauptstrasse or the main street. That social unrest is always, pick your zip code or period in history, followed by a political centralization over your personal and financial lives, whether it's by the political left or the political right, extreme. We're seeing that play out in real time right now. Debt-soaked nations in the West, debasing their currency, creating inflation, causing social unrest, splintering, politicization of everything, and more extreme control, whether it's lockdown policies during the COVID fiction, or whether, in my opinion, or whether it's the debasement of our currency and internet and introducing this Trojan horse of central bank digital currency to monitor and control your assets like we monitor and control Russia in the Putin war. So I see more centralization, lack of accountability, more debasement of the currency, more artificial solutions masquerading as humanitarian or banking crisis necessities, which could have been solved by sound policy, sound politics, honest accountability. And I see more turmoil ahead for the West before I see a renaissance of smart thinking and better decision-making.
No. There was a interesting article in the Telegraph last week. It was the 40th birthday of the pound coin. And we replaced the pound note with the pound coin. So that in itself was a mark of debasement. But it was the 40th birthday. And in the 40 years since the pound coin was born, the Telegraph calculated that the pound has lost 70% of its purchasing power in the last 40 years. But actually, it's only lost 70% of its purchasing power against food, which on the whole has got cheaper. If you look at its purchasing power against education, housing, those kind of things, it's actually above 90% in 40 years.
Yeah.
And I just see over the next 40 years, it's just going to do the same thing. So it's going to lose another 90%, but it's going to be 10% a year, 5% another year, 15% another year. So it's gradual. So you don't necessarily notice it in real time. But in another 40 years, we will be able to buy a microcosm with $1 or £1 that we're able to buy today.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we're making incredible, I'm so excited by this AI boom that's happening, and it's just going to make us so much more productive. So while fiat carries on losing its purchasing power, what Bitcoin has done is it's been the most amazing educative tool. So when I used to write articles 15 years ago, I would always have to explain what fiat meant. Whereas now everyone knows fiat, and it's because, monetary illiteracy was a thing. But now because of Bitcoin and also because of gold, but, the young understand the debasement of currency. That narrative is out.
Yeah.
And I just think you're going to see more and more people while it's almost like a two-tier financial system. So there's going to be huge productivity, increased productivity, especially digital, which we've seen for the last 20 years. There's no reason why it can't continue for another 20 or 40. ever expanding, ever incompetent, ever government, evasive government, declining purchasing power of its money, all that stuff. But alongside this incredible productivity, and I just think you'll see almost two classes of individual: sovereign individuals who live country to country, and other individuals who are locked in the fiat economy of their own governments. And you'll see more and more transactions in sound money outside of the fiat system.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like almost like a two-tiered economy. I see that developing. And in the same way that, you know how, we have these globalized corporations, like where is Google based? Where is Starbucks based? Its IP is here. It's based in Ireland, but its profits are somewhere else. Where are these? I think you will see globalized individuals as well.
Interesting.
Well, we're similar with the digital nomads. The government's trying to take, you should spend 30 days in Costa Rica. We're going to tax you 30 days.
Fastest growing workforce in the world.
Yeah.
It's really, really interesting.
And if they tax them for being in one place for 30 days, they'll just go somewhere else. They will go where they're welcome.
Interesting. Fantastic comments, gentlemen. Yeah. Amazing conversation. Really, really appreciate it. Where can we find more?
So my Substack is the Flying Frisby, flyingfrisby.com. And it's extremely popular and it's growing all the time, and you should all subscribe.
And then, Matthew, where can we find more of you?
Same old place, GoldSwitzerland.com. It's Matterhorn Asset Management. We're based out of Zurich, and Egon and I write articles every week. And like you, we're trying to find new ways to make this interesting because it's super important right now.
Awesome. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Thanks so much for joining us here in Frankfurt. Yeah. Everybody else, thank you so much for tuning in. We hope you found this insightful. I sure did, because I heard a lot of new things as well, which was great, because it gets a bit boring after a while, I have to admit, because you hear the same things, unless a big macro event happens that sort of stirs shit up a little bit. So thanks so much for tuning in. Subscribe, like as well, leave a comment. Where do you think things are headed? And we'll be back with lots more from this conference. Thank you so much.